Welcome back to By Sword and Musket. Thanks for joining us. Let's have a look at this old sword. This is a brief pictorial and video record of a restoration of a Japanese military mounted katana. It's an ancient blade made in the late 1600s. It's picked up quite a bit of corrosion through use. It was surrendered at the end of the Second World War under instructions from the Emperor. You can see damage to the leading edge, the front edge, and you can see that it was remounted by the two holes in the tang. The handle was externally broken on the way back through India, and we had to find a replacement for that. These are nice Buddhist type symbols on the blade that all have a meaning, and the tang is fully engraved, giving maker's name and province, period, who it was made for, and what the cutting test was. And rather gorily, this sword tested as being able to cut through the pelvis. That's the old handle, which we had to replace because it was broken. On stripping it down, it practically crumbled in our hands. And here's a quick look over the sword blade before I started actually working on it with the whetstones. Tang was left alone, and then you can see the extent of the corrosion to the sword in this clip. This part of the video, you can see a patch there just coming into view between the engraving and the groove that someone's tried to gouge away with something metallic. You can see the front and cutting edge are in quite a bad state. This is the other side. Once again, a fair bit of corrosion. You can see the irregular hamon along the front edge of the blade. And there was a careful balancing act carried out there to try and not completely lose it. But a fair bit of material had to come off to remove the corrosion, and none of it was done by machine. It was all done by hand. What I'm attempting to do now is to keep the 15-degree angle across the slope of the blade, but take this rust pitting out of the front. Obviously it doesn't appear evenly, so it has to be removed very carefully and try to maintain the curve, not to lose the wonderful engraving work and not to lose that fine line down the middle where the two angles meet, where the flat and the angle meet. We shall continue. Very important to maintain a steady and even pressure at all times on the blade, but not let it dig in at the edges of the stone. The other thing is constant reference and examination up close by eye at the effects that you're actually producing on the blade. Too much on one side may cause a dip or a change to the contours. The other thing is it has to remain well lubricated, and being one of the main elements involved in the construction of the sword, we refer to and bring water back into the equation. So this is quite a long way into the next stage of polishing to remove the marks left by the whetstones. This can't be done on a machine, so it has to be done by hand. A bit of good old-fashioned elbow grease. And so far it has taken me, I would say, 5 days to get it to this stage. And at the moment I can still see some tiny little scratch marks here and there, depending on how deep they are. It's a matter of how easily they do or don't come out. I'm using a combination of polish, metal polish, and various degrees of 1200, 2000 grit, 3200 grit, papers, file boards, etc. to get rid of these polishing marks. All of the corrosion on all the flat edges is gone. All of the damage front to the blade is gone from the cutting edge. The last bit that will remain to do after these flats are the the grooves, the blood runs, and the correct angle on the back that meets in the spine. It might be something like that. Every now and again I do a little bit to change the angle of my hands and arms are working out. A bit of variety because the old elbows have become quite painful. From repetitive strain. I suppose I've been on this a month now. The actual blade. I've managed to restore the scabbard. The scabbard had a wooden centre to it, which comes out, and that had a lot of grease in it, which someone had put on to protect the sword, which is not a bad thing because it has protected it for 80 years, but it's not what we want on it when we finish. So I have managed to clean that wooden insert to the scabbard out completely. Washed it out with gun thinners from the spraying industry. Pushed various bits of cloth and pull through up there and removed all the grease, so when the blade does go back in, eventually it won't pick up that grease that's been left in there as a residue. Now the idea with these foam back boards is they can follow the contours of the steel and take out scratch marks as they ride over the bumps and lumps. If you do this on a machine, it will destroy the soul of the sword, I suppose. It becomes a flat, machine-made object. And that's not what we want from something of this kind of age. We want it to remain hand finished, hand worked upon. The blade has become rather sharp in this process, but I haven't actually got onto the individual process of sharpening the edge yet. That will be the last thing I do, but I'm not going to bring it up too sharp, just in case little fingers ever get hold of it. Get it out of the display cabinet. But I would say it's probably getting pretty lethal already. And slowly, the scratches are disappearing, and the hamon is reappearing. The difficulty, of course, is not to create soft edges, but sharp, defined edges. Still see scratches. Yep, have to go in again. So in the reflection, although this looks beautifully shiny on the surface, I can still see scratch marks. And that's not good enough for a Japanese sword. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right back to 2000 grit and some polishing paste. Just have one more real go at it. Now I'm trying to exert the pressure on the middle of the surface, not necessarily on the edges. The edges are bright enough. When you do this, a suction eventually develops between the blade and the polish. And that is when it's doing its best work. Seriously getting through these nail polishing pads takes longer with the higher grits. But you must be careful with the lower grit that you don't scratch it. I can still see them. They are being stubborn. Sometimes it feels like you're actually not doing anything at all, apart from just wearing out your elbows. sword polishers will be turning in their graves. Anyway, let's go back to concentrating on the blade. Where have we got to? The Hammon, clay baked hardened front edge, holds the scratches much longer than the portion in between. You have to really work on that. It's very, very hard. Right. Back to step one again. Some quite deep waterstone marks here, which I have to now try and get out. So here we are again, day 19 or something like that. Good to get back outside in the sunshine because you can see a lot more of the tiny little left behind marks underneath the polish almost. So I'm going back to a dry paper at this moment, and I'm working across. So if I can see scratches going that way, I'm going that way to counter them. Which I can still see scratches going that way, and that was the last thing I was working on last night. But underneath those tiny scratches, I can actually see still stone marks, especially in the hamon, which is the hardened front portion, the cutting edge of the blade, where an awful lot of corrosion had to be removed. And it's a balancing act between removing that corrosion and not completely losing the hamon. So I will take this back to a matte finish and try and cut across these marks and remove them. And yes, maybe back in 1689 or whenever it was that this was made, they used stones, flattened stones, which were perfectly flat and of different grades, but I can't get those easily. Oops, they have another piece of sandpaper. Better go and get that because that's my last 2000. The finished article, reassembled, replacement handle, same period. Scabbard much as it was before, just cleaned up. A few dents in there, we'll keep those because of them being picked up in service. All the fittings, had to reposition the peg and blank the other hole. Replacement knot, my colours. Inside. All impurities, pockets in the folded steel. There's grease still coming out of the scabbard, although it was washed out with petrol. And gun thinners. There we are, an awful lot of polishing later. Hamon is still visible, you can see it there. Regular cloud hamon. Original inscriptions are still there. There's the carvings. Once again, thanks for joining us. Please remember to click like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this.